I have to get a sweeter voice.
She doesn't count. Mute all. Mute all.
I told you that one of my grandchildren, so he programmed his ways with his mother-in-law's voice.
I'm not sure what the chachma there is.
You turn right, you turn right.
It's your mother on the fence.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeffrey. How are you?
When did I become Jeffrey? Yehuda.
Yehuda. This week's Parsha.
20 years we've known you.
This week's Parsha. Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. Very good Erev Shabbat. Today's Parsha Shiur is dedicated by our good friend Naomi Mauer in memory of her husband, Dr. Ivan Mauer, Zichrono Livrocha. We appreciate her help over all the years. A very good friend and a wonderful woman. And Dr. Mauer was a very special man. This week's Parsha opens for us a vista of Jewish life and of Jewish thought regarding names. Names are very important in Jewish life. They are often the source of blessings and also of tensions. And the Torah itself concentrates on names. The Torah tells us reasons why people were named what they were named. So we have Adam, because Mino Adam Alukach, it's taken from the earth. Chava, he also Ein Kol Choy, the mother of life, and so on. So that the name Hevel comes to mean something that is not permanent, that really doesn't last. Because Hevel is killed immediately. So when we speak of Hevel, we don't speak of the person. We speak as Shlomo HaMelech did, Havel Avolim Omar Koheles Hakol Ovel. Things that are not permanent. Most of our accomplishments are not permanent. We don't take our wealth with us. Even our intelligence wanes. And we say it every morning, again, quoting Koheles. Umotar Odom min habehema oyin ki hakol hova. It's all nothingness. Then we come to Noah. And the Torah says they called him Noah because they Yenachamenu. He'll bring to us comfort. So therefore he was called Noah. Rashi says the reason is that quoting the Medrash, he was the father of technology, created tools. invented the plow, made it possible for human life to become more productive and easier. So that's Noach. The Gemara Darshans, the Meforshim Darshan, they all explain Shem, Chom, and Yofes. That refers to their characteristics. So Shem is someone who is interested in preserving his name. Chom is someone who is hot-blooded, emotional, behaves irrationally. And Yofes is the beauty of the arts, of literature. So the Torah always saw in the name of the person more than just the name. And we come to Avraham Avinu, so there his name is changed to represent who he really is. Lo yikor shimcha od Avram ki im Avraham, ki av hamon goyim l'saticha. So now you're the father of many nations. You're a universal father. The introduction of monotheistic practice into the world. So that's reflected in his name. He and Sarah, also her name was Sarai. So Sarai is mine, it belongs to me. I'm the power, I'm the officer, I'm the one, and that's not her name anymore, it's Sarah. Also universal, not only for one's own personal self, but for all of humankind. Then you have Yitzchak. So there's very different reasons for Yitzchak, all of which are associated with the fact that he is, his birth rather, is so incongruous, so unlikely. Kol hashomeya yitzchak li. Anybody you tell the story to, they'll laugh. It can't be. And the Torah even describes how Yerushalayim is named. Asher yomer bayom ahu bahar Hashem yeroeh. So Yerushalayim is a combination of Yira, Yeroeh, and of Sholem, Malki Tzedek Melech Sholem. The two names were combined to be Yerushalayim. And you'll find in Tanakh that Yerushalayim is rarely spelled with a yud at the end. It's always spelled Lamed Mem, because that's Shalem. So you have here all of these names. And then we have last week's Parsha, Esav and Yaakov. Esav is Admoni Kulo Seir. So Esav is born whole, mature. And that's why he's called Edom. So he's called Edom because of the way he was born, but then he's called Edom because of the red soup of lentils that he sold the Bechorah for. And Yaakov is called Yaakov, ki yodo chezes ba'kevei savochiv, because he's holding on to the heel. And Esav will interpret Yaakov differently. Achikora Shmo Yaakov, you know why he's called Yaakov? Vayakveni ze pamoyim. He's cheated me twice. He took my Bechorah and now he takes the bracha. So the names are very, very important because in the Torah, the names speak to the people. They tell us who they are. We'll have regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, Kimin Amayim Shisiyu. So these are not abstract names. And in fact, we'll find in the Midrashim that many of these people had other names. Moshe had, for instance, other names, Yekusiel, Toviah, Yered, but he's not called by those names, even though those may have been the names that his parents gave him. But he's called Moshe. The Torah wants us to remember that he was saved from the waters. So now we come to this week's Parsha, which is loaded with names. Again, just one more note about this week's Parsha. When he comes to the place where he has the dream, Yaakov Avinu, and he sees Sula Mutzav Artzov Rosha Magia Shamoima. So it says, Vayikor Shema Mokam Ahu Beisel. Yaakov Avinu named it Beisel, the house of God, because there he saw this miraculous vision of heaven. The Torah remarks that wasn't its name. It was known as the city of Luz. But Yaakov renamed it because of the event that took place there. And we find that again in the Torah regarding Beersheba. The one interpretation is because they took an oath there of Roman and Avimelech. Another interpretation is Sheva because there were 7 sheep or rams that were sacrificed there. A third interpretation is because there were 7 wells there. But the name is not a random name. And you'll find throughout human society, names play a great role, and certainly names of places. So we name them after people, we name them after events, we name them after the geography of the area. We name them sometimes because of memory. So all of that is in this week's Parsha. So Yaakov Avinu is going to father the 12 tribes of Israel. And the Torah details for us the name that was given to each of the sons and the reason that it was given. And that remains, if you look at it, you say, well, who needs this, right? It should say that Yaakov Avinu had 11 sons, 12 sons, and a daughter, and that he went home, he took his children with him. Who cares what their names are? The Torah almost lovingly devotes an explanation to each of the names. So why was he called Ruvain? See, my child, I gave birth to a child, Leah says. Chazal darshaned, Chazal expanded it and said, Ruma bein b'ni leven chomi. Look at the difference between my children, my child, and other children. My relatives, right? They're cousins. Their cousins are pagans. Your cousins are violent. My son is therefore special. And then she has a son, Shimon. Kishoma Hashem, the Rebbeinu Shalom heard, the Rebbeinu Shalom is aware. Now, all of these children are named in relationship to the domestic discord that exists in the house of Yaakov Avinu. Leah is constantly striving that Yaakov should accept her, that he should somehow get over the fact that she became his wife through subterfuge, through the cheating of Lavan. And to a certain extent, Yaakov feels always his relationship with Leah is one of betrayal. He was betrayed. He feels that by being with Leah, he betrays Rachel. It's a very complex, difficult situation. Now, why it occurs this way, that's on Historas Hashem Elokeinu. But those were the facts that the Chumash records for us. So he's coming from an emotionally difficult place. And she suffers. Vayar Hashem kisnu aleya. The Lord is aware of her discomfort. So every child that she has, she gives a name that somehow she hopes will change the situation. Shimon, Shoma Hashem Kol Bichi, the Rebbeinu Shalom heard my weeping, my angst, my tension, terrible. The Lord has heard me. Now, before Shimon point out that this also puts a burden on the child, because the child will grow up and know why he or she was named that way. And that further complicates the matter. Levi, upon Yilove Ishi, now he will accompany me. I gave birth to 3 sons, and my quota is fulfilled. Certainly now he will change his attitude towards me. But the Torah never records what happens with Leah. I mean, our tradition is, Yaakov Avinu says it, that he buried Leah in the Moras HaMachpelah, and that she lies with him there. Rachel will be buried on the road, here at Efrat, on the way to Bethlehem. But the Torah tells us nothing about Leah later. What was supposed to happen in the family dynamics. And then she gives birth to Yehuda. Hapam Odes Hashem. I give thanks to God. Because it's more than my quota now. Medrash tells us that they each were aware that they would have 4 wives, and each one would therefore contribute 3 sons. And now she has 4 already. So therefore, Odes Hashem, Yehuda. Unfortunately, also point out that Yehuda is the same Hebrew root as Modeh, someone who can admit something. In the story of Yehuda and Tamar, that Yehuda will say, Tzodka mimeni, she's right, I'm wrong. He'll say it publicly. But all the embarrassment that's involved. The power to admit. That will be with the revelation of the story with Yosef itself. Yehuda is the one that saves the situation. And that's why the Jewish people are called on the name of Yehuda. Yehuda. That's not enough. Then she has a 5th son, Zvulun. Again, Hapam Yizbeleni Ishi. My husband now will build his house with me. 5 sons. He has to come to me. He has to have a relationship with me. I'm the main one here. And finally, she has a 6th son, Yisachar. It's my reward for everything. Half of the Jewish people. That's something that Yaakov cannot ignore. Rachel does not have children. She's barren. And there's a crisis, therefore, between Yaakov and Rachel. If Leah would not have children as well, so then it would be possible to say that Yaakov is the one that's barren. But Leah has a flock of children. And Rachel complains. She says, when your father didn't have, and your mother didn't have children, your father prayed for it. You put effort into it. And apparently you don't care. So there's a further tension in the family. And Yaakov answers her, Atachas Elohimoni. What do you want from me? Am I God? I'm not a miracle worker. Medrash points out that the Yaakov should not have said that. The Medrash says, is that the way you talk to people who are depressed and who are so sad? You chastise them, you say it's your fault. So in this, played out the entire drama of human life. Very difficult situations. That's why Yaakov will say later, when he's asked how old he is, he'll say, Ma'at v'roim ayu yemei chayai. I did not have an easy life, not from day one. So you're living in a house that's full of tension. And that will explain, not justify, but will explain the background for the brothers and Yosef. They're raised with this tension. They're raised with having difficulties in the house. And therefore they are suspicious. They see things negatively. From that unfolds the story, but that's not this week's Parsha yet. So Rachel resorts to the idea that Sarah Imenu did. And she gives her maidservant Bilhah to Yaakov that he should marry her. And she gives birth to 2 sons. For reasons which the Meforshim discuss, but it's very hard to put our minds around it. Leah imitates her. She takes her maidservant Zilpah and gives her to Yaakov, and each one of them gives birth to 2 sons, Don, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, which only introduces a further tension into the house, because now there are a lot of players psychologically that exist. And there the Torah gives us a reason every time why they were named. Asher ki ashrini bonos. Naftuli Elokim niftalti. I've wrestled and I've overcome. But God is Mazel Tov. Simcha came. Don, the Nani Elokim, the Lord has judged me and found me innocent. So each one of these names, every time you mention it, you are opening up the whole story. Which is an interesting observation. We'll talk about it in a minute, how it has practical import as well. So finally, Rachel gives birth to a child, to a son. Leah gave birth to a daughter, Dinah. So there again, the Meforshim say, because she was supposed to give birth to a 7th son, and that would have eliminated Rachel's share completely. So the Ravona Shalom made that she gave birth to a daughter. That was the judgment. So it's the first in the long line of Jewish women that should really have been a boy. And they could have been Gaonim. So the Rachel son's name is Yosef. Saying, Yosef Hashem li ben acher. It's not enough, this one. Let him increase. I want another one. So in effect, you're saying the child is not the fulfillment yet. And then you have that Binyamin will be born. Rachel will call him Ben-Oni, the child of my affliction, because she's dying in childbirth. And Yaakov will call him Binyamin. But you cannot say Binyamin without realizing that his mother died. Without realizing that originally he was Ben-Oni. So if we put it all together, if you say these names, each one evokes a memory and not necessarily a pleasant one. Each one evokes a tension, a struggle, an attempt to overcome situation that could destroy others. And out of that, Yaakov has to build the Jewish people. Over the ages, names have been very important in Jewish life. But sometimes it's almost a luck of the draw. So biblical names remain amongst us. But for instance, the names of the great people of the Talmud have disappeared completely. Nobody calls their child Abaya, Rava. Ula. The names have all gone, even though those were the names of the greatest scholars of Israel. And names change. They become corrupted. So, for instance, the name Shneor, which is famous in Ashkenaz, in the Ashkenazic world. The first Lubavitcher Rebbe was Shneor Zalman. So Shneor Zalman are both not Hebrew names. Shneor is the corruption of the Spanish Señor. Was a Spanish name. And the Jews in Spain, so you had Avram Señor, it was a famous name. When they left Spain and they came to Eastern Europe, so Señor became Shneor. Zalman is Shlomo. But that's Germanized Shlomo. And you have many times people today are called by both names, Shlomo Zalman, they go together. Other names that go together, Shraga Feivel. So Shraga is again an Aramaic name, meaning fire. Feivel is also fire, German, etc., etc. So then the question arose, are names supposed to be memories for previous generations or for events? Or are names to be taken at random? So again, both in the Ashkenazic and Sephardic world, names were supposed to evoke memories. So in the Ashkenazic world, we name children after deceased relatives because we want their names to be remembered. So if you say if the child's name is Moshe, so then it's because his Zeta was Moshe, so then he knows that he had a grandfather. He remembers. Then all sorts of connections arose so that there were superstitions regarding names. What if the grandfather was not such a nice guy? What if the grandfather died tragically young? I remember after the Shoah, immediately afterwards, when the survivors had children, they did not name them after those that were destroyed in the Shoah. So is the Shoah to be remembered or to be forgotten? And these issues existed throughout the Jewish history and Jewish life. So now in Israel, for instance, we have all sorts of different names. So popular names, Eitan, So that's a reference to Avram Avinu. But you have like Ayal, or a name after a deer, or names after plants, or all sorts of names. And the Yiddish names disappear into, for a great deal of Israeli society. And the Sephardim have a completely different system of names. One of the interesting things that happened here in Eretz Yisrael is that when the Jewish pioneers returned, they named all of the places again with their biblical names. In order that should establish the continuity of Jewish life in this country. So names are important. People feel very emotional about them. In my rabbinic career, I have had to soothe ruffled feelings at circumcisions many times because of the fact that the child was given name A and some of the parents wanted name B. And so the custom became that you had more than one name. Some people had as many as 3 names or 4 names to try and satisfy that. And that always puts a burden on the child. And if you have a name that would register somehow as being strange, and you don't want to do that to the child. Go to school, they'll all make fun of him. I know a wonderful person that they wanted to name him after his grandfather or great-grandfather. The name would be Yechiel Michel, but he would have to go to the American public school system. So they would call him Ichi Michi. So they didn't want that to happen. So they called him something else. But there always was a tinge of regret in the family that he wasn't named Yechiel Michel. So the Torah opens up this Pandora's box for us this week with the names of the Shvatim. But with the realization that by taking all the names together, we invoke the memories of the Ovos and Imohos. And therefore, the task in life is to blend them all together so that you have this great people that will survive and preserve all of the names. And that's the task of Klal Yisrael. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next week. Good. No. Rabbi Monk, no one would call him Ichi Michi.